Bizarre stories from subscribers. Ha 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 ha. Hi Leo Augusto, my name is Jose. I'm 14 years old and I really like your videos. If you pick this story, draw me wearing a Corinthians shirt to make it really cool. Anyway, this story happened last year when I went to spend my vacation at my grandfather's house in Colares, a small town in the state of Pará. In this city, there have been many reports of alien sightings. Just search on Google if you have any doubts. I used to think all that talk was nonsense, but while I was there, I adopted a kitten and named him Bruxo. He had strange behaviors sometimes, but I always ignored it and played with him just fine. Whenever we went to sleep, we would leave Bruxo outside so he wouldn't knock things over inside the house, right? You know how cats are, they usually do that, get into everything. But Bruxo didn't like to stay outside. He would start meowing non-stop until someone let him in. Then he'd be fine and stop meowing, right? But he would cause chaos inside. One day my grandfather started telling some scary stories about that town. He said that when he was young, a humanoid creature appeared and watched him through his bedroom window. I didn't take it very seriously, to be honest. It must be just another legend to scare people, right? Until later that night, around midnight or so, right? Bruxo started meowing. It was my turn to bring him inside the house, so I got up and went there. I was hearing some strange noises on the roof, but I ignored them, thinking it was another cat, right? Some cat in heat out there trying something. It's important to remember that my grandfather's house was facing a small thicket when I opened the door to get the cat. I saw something bizarre, a tall and skinny creature, also green, that was camouflaged in the bushes. It was very scary and stared at me with glowing eyes. What left me in shock is that I couldn't move Leo until I realized the cat was meowing at it. That abominable creature ran into the woods and the cat went after it. I didn't have the courage to go after him, so I locked myself inside the house and covered myself up. What if that thing showed up at my window and took me to its flying saucer? The next day, I told this story to my family. My grandfather said that it was an alien that had fallen from a flying saucer a long time ago, and some of his friends, farmers, had already seen this creature before, walking around their properties. I got scared and remembered the cat, so I went looking for him, but I couldn't find the wizard. The next day, we left that place, and to this day, it still gives me chills. Hello, my name is Jorge. I was only 10 years old at the time of this story. It was a day like any other at school until something strange happened. While we were at recess, I was walking outside, in the courtyard, when I saw some balloons flying. I thought some student had let them go, so I didn't care and kept walking, right? Until suddenly, I saw a clown approaching. He came up to me and offered me a candy. He had a wide smile and bright eyes, but something about him made me uneasy. Why is he here? Is there going to be a party that I don't know about? I've never seen this happen before at school. The clown said that if I ate his candy, all my wishes would come true. That sounded tempting and at the same time unreal, Some intuition inside me warned me not to accept that thing. I knew that taking things from strangers is something I shouldn't do, so I decided to politely refuse the offer. However, right next to me was Gregory, a guy from the classroom next door, and he didn't act the same way I did. Driven by the urge to eat free candy, he accepted the clown's offer. I tried to warn him, but it didn't work. He ended up eating it, man. The clown smiled with satisfaction and said that his wish would be granted soon. And he left in the blink of an eye. Some students, seeing this situation, came to receive it too, but it was already too late. He was already gone. In the days that followed, Gregory hadn't shown up at school. He disappeared completely and no one really knew what had happened to him. I tried to find information about his whereabouts, but he seemed to have vanished without a trace. The following month, I was coming back from the bathroom and heading outside, right? out there in the courtyard, and again, I saw balloons flying over the area. I saw a crowd of students there, you know, man? And I got closer. It was the clown handing out candies. But this time, there were a lot of students taking them. He even asked me if I would accept his candy this time. But I ran away from there without looking back. Coincidentally, there are never any adults around when he shows up. I tried to find the inspector, but it seemed like he was absent. There was no one in the principal's office either. It didn't even seem like there were any staff working there at that time, are you kidding? The next day, more students hadn't gone to school. Just in my class, so you have an idea, 12 were missing. I was sure that was a consequence of that bizarre clown. To me, he gave out those candies with something inside and made people disappear with some kind of substance. Parents of missing students showed up at the school reporting that their children didn't come home after class. But the school said that from the moment the students leave, they're no longer responsible. Even so, the school security was reinforced, electric fences were installed, and security cameras were put up. But something tells me that won't be enough to keep that clown away from here. Hello, Leo. My name is Samuel. I'm 12 years old, around March of this year. My mom and dad were renovating our bathroom, and it took about 2 weeks to finish everything because they had to tear it down and build a much bigger one. Until one day, I had a huge urge to poop, but there was nowhere to go. My mom told me to just go out in the woods because it was no problem, right? I live in the countryside and you know how it is. We can poop in the woods, no problem. I agreed and went. It was around 5:30 in the afternoon. It was already getting dark. After I was done, I cleaned myself up. There was an adjacent field that also belonged to my father. But the grass over there was really tall. At some point inside the grass, I heard a whistle. You might think, oh, Samuel, you were in the field and the whistle was probably from a bird. But it wasn't. The whistle came from someone and it wasn't my father's. I know his whistle and this one was higher pitched. At that moment, I heard the whistle and I froze, right? I looked at the field and saw a shadow in the middle of the grass deep inside. It looked like a person with completely black skin and clothes. With a hat and the typical clothes you wear when you go work in the fields, but everything was black. I was paralyzed because to get back home, I had to pass right next to that field, you know, man. The creature kept watching me with red eyes. But even so, I made a quick run, man. I looked back for about 5 seconds, and I saw that it wasn't coming after me. When I looked again, the creature had gone through the wire fence, as if there was nothing there. It seemed like with every passing moment, it was getting closer, and more and more. My God, I prayed so much that day. I had never prayed while running before. I managed to spot my house, and when I got there, I told my parents that there was a shadow man following me. My dad went outside with a gun, you know, to see if the man was there. But he didn't find anything, Leo. There weren't even any footprints on the ground. The next day, when I was out herding the cattle to put them in the corral, I heard screams coming from that old forest. I got home and asked my sister if she was playing some trick on me, you know? And she said she had just woken up. I thanked God when the bathroom was finished because I wouldn't have to go outside to do my business anymore, you know? But I'm still afraid and I still don't know what that was. Hello Leo, my name is Pedro. I'm a big fan of the channel. Today, I'm going to tell a story that happened to me when my family and I went on a trip. More precisely, to a small town in Rio Grande do Sul. We were going to celebrate my 10th birthday and I got a new bicycle. When we arrived at the inn, I went to try it out. I went down the main street of the town, turned left and then right, ending up on a little dead-end street. So, after pedaling a bit, I sat down on the sidewalk and started eating some candies I always carry in my pocket. A boy came out of one of the houses. He showed up there. He was about the same age as me and was holding a slingshot. I greeted him and we talked for a bit. I found out that his name was Roger. About 20 minutes into our conversation, he asked me if I wanted to pick some grapes and blackberries from the house of a grumpy old lady who never picked the fruit. I agreed right away. He hopped on the back of the bike and I pedaled. The house wasn't far. After about 4 minutes, he said we had arrived. We leaned the bike against the wall and I looked at the house. It was pretty run down, with a wall made of old cracked bricks. The sidewalk was dusty and dirty. Roger gave me a boost to climb the wall and I helped him up too. From up there, I was able to take a better look at the house. The windows were broken and the glass door looked open. The walls hadn't been painted. Everything was messed up. We went down into the yard and started picking the grapes and blackberries that were lying around, scattered, and also on the tree. That's when I heard the doorknob turning and started nudging Hodger so he could see it too. But when he looked, the door swung open and an old wrinkled woman came out, her face looking like it had melted, man. In one of her hands, she was holding some kind of whip and started running after us. We dropped the fruit and climbed the wall. Roger tried to shoot the old lady with his slingshot, but I left before seeing the outcome. I was down and went to the street to get my bike. When I looked at Roger's face, he was in really bad shape. He said that when he took a shot at the old lady with the slingshot, the stone went right through her body. But I didn't believe what he said and I took off. I'll never forget that day. Years later, I found out that the grumpy old lady had already passed away and what we found in that house was her trapped soul. That's why the house was run down and neglected, right? It was abandoned. I believe her frightening actions were a manifestation of her personality in life, which continued to haunt the place even after her death. Thank you for reading my story, Leo. Hello, Leo Augusto. My name is Augusto. If there are any writing mistakes, I apologize. I live in Portugal and I'm learning Portuguese. The story I'm going to tell you happened to my father. He was working at a very big company and there was a legend there that a janitor climbed on top of an elevator to clean it because it was all dirty. But he forgot to turn off the elevator and was crushed when the elevator went up to the top floor. It was said that whoever used the elevator would see the spirit of the janitor. My father wasn't into those things and didn't believe in it. But there was a day when he started to believe. My father worked on the top floor and he was late. Since the other elevators were in use, he decided to use the elevator that was considered cursed. While he was in the elevator, the lights started to flicker out of nowhere and he began to hear voices in his ears saying, "Get out of here. Leave immediately. You must go now." My father, not paying attention, stayed in the elevator, thinking it was just broken and flickering like that, until the elevator stopped on a floor he didn't recognize and a very strange person walked in. This person was huge and was hitting their head on the elevator ceiling. He looked at my father and said, "Hey sir, you shouldn't be here." My father, not understanding, replied that he was going to work and that he should be there. Yes. At that moment, the mysterious man let out a huge scream and said, "You shouldn't be here. Get off this floor now." The elevator doors opened and my father was pushed onto that floor. He fainted and when he woke up, he was in the hospital. When he asked the nurse what had happened, she explained that he was found unconscious in the building with no one around. Thank you for reading my story, Leo Augusto. Hello, Leo Augusto. My name is Yasmin and today I'm going to share an intriguing story that happened to me when I was just 6 years old. That day I was at my grandmother's house. My mother and she went out shopping at the market, leaving me there only in the company of my faithful feline friend. While I was playing, I heard a mysterious sound echoing down the hallway. Intrigued, I decided to investigate. When I got there, I looked around cautiously. But to my surprise, there was nothing out of place. The clock showed 3 o'clock in the afternoon and I decided to continue playing, now with my dolls in the living room. However, what happened next left a deep mark on my memory. Once again, the enigmatic sound echoed through the room coming from the same bathroom, right? My heart raced as I tried to open the door, but inexplicably, it seemed to be stuck. With a bit of apprehension, I grabbed my phone and dialed my mom, longing for a familiar voice to calm me down. On the other end of the line, she explained that she was shopping at the market and would be back soon. Now, isolated in my grandmother's room, the feeling of tension grew with every passing second. Suddenly, anguished screams echoed through the bathroom. Making my body tremble with fear, desperate, I forced the door once more to see what was inside. And this time I managed to open it. The sight that unfolded before my eyes was almost surreal. A woman with black hair and a vacant stare was standing there, like a soul that was trapped there in the world of the living. The clock now showed 6 o'clock in the evening. The twilight was beginning to envelop the place, and my heart was about to leap out of my throat. Leo. The woman kept repeating a whisper, almost a lament. Give me your soul. My legs gave out and I fainted, powerless to deal with the magnitude of what was happening. When I regained consciousness, I found myself in bed, surrounded by my grandmother's concern and my mother's relieved gaze. I told them about the series of frightening events that had happened. My grandmother, with a serious expression, shared a haunting story with me. She explained that the woman I saw was named Mary. She had died tragically in that bathroom decades ago, and it was only after my grandmother bought that property that she found out the whole truth. This woman named Mary had been erased from this world by her own alcoholic husband. It was as if the energy of her death had left a mark on that place, and every now and then she would appear there. From that day on, I never had the courage to go into my grandmother's bathroom again. I don't even know how she manages to live there with that spirit appearing in her bathroom. God forbid. Hi Leo, my name is Saulo. If you use my story, draw me chubby, tall, and with big curly hair. Alright man, when I was a kid, about 5 or maybe 7 years old, my dad shared a story with me that always intrigued me. He told me he had witnessed something bizarre when he was young, and to this day he's afraid that thing might show up again. It's interesting how these childhood memories can stay with us, isn't it? Back then my dad was a skinny and short little boy. He sat by the window in the countryside in a modest little wooden house that faced a forest. My grandmother, his mother, was busy in the kitchen preparing dinner. Back then things were tough, man, and food was scarce. Often they had nothing to eat. At that moment, she was preparing cornmeal mush for them. So that night, under the full moon, something unusual was heard, man. A bunch of frantic dog barking out front. The barking echoed, echoing down the hill near the window. That hill was part of the dirt road, right? That wound around the farm. And from nearby came those disturbing sounds from all the crazy people, man. My father described the creature as being tall, entirely covered in black fur, which seemed to stand out against the background of the night. The creature's ears were upright, attentive to every sound, picking up all the details of that mysterious night. With slow and calculated steps, the creature approached. He mentioned that the animal raised a paw, displaying sharp claws, as if it was about to launch an imminent attack, sensing the danger. My father quickly moved away from the window, closed it, and threw himself inside the house. With his heart racing, he ran to the kitchen, seeking shelter under my grandmother's protective wing. He told her what he saw, and her response was simple, man. "That's a werewolf, my son. Hide under the table, I'll get the shotgun. If that creature comes in here this time, I'll shoot." They heard the dogs barking getting louder, and after a while it stopped. They believed the dogs managed to drive the creature away from the house, right? And since that day, my father never saw that creature again. Even so, he seemed a little scared when he told me about it. So I think it's true, Leo. Thank you for reading our story. Hello, Leo Augusto. How are you? My name is Guilherme, and I am currently 13 years old. I would like to share a story that goes back to my childhood when I was only 6 years old. At that time in my life, I used to spend my days at home enjoying leisure moments with games and activities that brought me peace and fun. However, a remarkable event came along to completely change that peaceful routine. I vividly remember the moment when my mother approached me carrying a worried look to give me the news of my aunt's passing. Those words hit me hard, shaking me deeply since I adored her. She was such a good person. Why did this have to happen to her? The day of the funeral came, and as we followed the funeral procession, I couldn't hold back my tears. The emotional impact of losing my dear aunt was clear, and every moment of the ceremony struck deep in my heart. It was tough, man. As the days went by after the burial, I started to notice something peculiar. A feeling of being watched started to take over me, and the presence of shadows and mysterious figures seemed to take shape before my eyes. This supernatural experience awakened a sense of fear in me as I tried to understand what was happening. It was only about 3 months after my aunt's passing that a truly disturbing event occurred. One night, as I was settling into sleep, my gaze was drawn toward the door of my room. There, I could see the figure of a feminine shadow with undefined outlines that seemed to be watching me. My heart raced, and I soon realized that shadowy figure was getting closer. My surprise and apprehension reached a new level when I identified who that figure was. In front of me, I saw the image of my dear aunt, but in a pale form and with eyes that seemed to absorb the light. She was wearing the same clothes as on the day of her passing. A moment of horror unfolded before my eyes when the figure opened her mouth and a dark liquid dripped from her lips. Soon everything went black and I don't remember anything else. The next morning, I was awakened by an intense headache, as if the events of the previous night had left a physical mark on me. Since then, my life has never been the same. Even as the years go by, the feeling of being watched still lingers. The shadows and figures still haunt me, and my aunt's voice still whispers inside my head, but I don't see her anymore. I don't know if it's the marks of the trauma I went through or if it's really her voice. Thank you for reading my story, Leo Augusto. Hello, Leo Augusto, this is my story. When I was 6 years old, I lived near a beach. And every Saturday, my relatives used to go there, you know? When night fell, they would make a bonfire there on the sand and start telling scary stories that had happened to them in their lives. Since my neighborhood was known for being haunted, telling a scary story wouldn't be hard, right? When it was my uncle's turn, he said that once he went to get cigarettes for my grandfather. At a little shop near his house, he asked the clerk and paid properly, you know. Then, when he was walking back home, he realized there was no one around. The street was deserted, man. It was like there was a Brazil game in the World Cup going on. Night was already falling, and that stretch was a bit poorly lit. Suddenly, my uncle saw someone at the end of the street. He squinted to see better and noticed it was a woman. Then, at one point, he walked past her, and the woman said, "Watch out for the car." My uncle looked back to ask her, "Why did you say that? What car?" Everything was empty there. When he turned around again to keep walking, he actually saw that there was an out-of-control car coming toward him. He quickly managed to jump onto the sidewalk, and that car sped by. He said that if he hadn't jumped, he would have been hit and consequently killed. When he looked back to see the woman, she was no longer there. She had disappeared. To this day, he tells this story and says that woman was a ghost and that she warned him to be careful with the approaching car even before it happened. And if you want to send a story to appear in this segment here, just send it to this email, inscritosleo@gmail.com. Alright?